Okay, can you hear me okay? It's a small but mighty crowd, so thank you. I'm going to fly through this, and my whole goal is to kind of introduce you to land trusts and the kind of things that are available for landowners, and then hopefully leave about 8-10 minutes for questions. But if you have one in the middle, just raise your hand. I have no problem stopping. So our mission is pretty straightforward. It's protect and restore land, water, wildlife. It covers the entire spectrum from agriculture to pure preservation. This gives you an idea of where we've worked. We work border to border, river to river, statewide. I want you to think about land trusts a little bit differently though. A lot of times they kind of get the characteristic of being kind of preservation. So you're probably familiar with the Nature Conservancy, you might be familiar with American Farmland Trust, and you kind of think about those larger organizations. But think about kind of local nonprofits. They're also land trusts, and they can really provide you opportunities maybe that the USDA or a government organization can't, and also not leave you kind of hanging out there by yourself. So I would view them as a partner. There's over 1,700 different land trusts in the country. 77% of the protection, however, is by 1/4 of the land trusts, and those are accredited land trusts. So the Land Trust Alliance has an accreditation process that kind of narrows that down to saying who's accredited, who's kind of doing these standards and practices. So kind of keep that in mind. But land trusts have protected over 56 million acres in the United States. A lot of that's private land protection. We're going to dive into that. Here's kind of a quick map of what it looks like. Most are on the eastern seaboard and out west, and these are little stars that show you there's 5 active land trusts in Iowa. A resource is the Land Trust Alliance, so check this website out. Again, this will cover the whole spectrum of land trust work across the country. So if you have land in other states, or if you have, want to look at that, you'll find every land trust for every niche. And there's many ways to do this, right? So you might be thinking about public land. Of course, working with a land trust can meet that end, but there's tremendous opportunity for private land protection, in particular conservation easements, but that also leads you to land stewardship. And then there's ways that the partnership of land trusts can kind of help serve some of the USDA programs, things like that. So this is just kind of a quick breakdown. I won't dive into this, but you can think about land donations, bequests, easements, bargain sales, all these things. And this is kind of one way, if you get on our landowner options website, you can kind of move through that. So I'm not going to dwell on this kind of matrix, but just know that that exists. I do want to stop though and talk about conservation easements, because I think this is one way we're going to move the needle. In the kind of the opening session, someone asked about how do I solidify the conservation practices I've done on my land to make sure that they're there for the next generation. And I'm going to give you some examples of things we've done to exactly do that. But an easement is a legally binding thing that kind of transcends generations. Right? So it's in perpetuity and it's on the land. So you can pass that on to your heirs, you could sell the land, you could keep it yourself, but those things stay on there and you can tailor that to your land's needs. That's the beauty of an easement. So they can be for ecological significance. You may have a trout stream or something that you care about. The back 40 might be special to you, but it might just be that the ag practices that you put on your land, you want to remain, and you can do that. And so forget what you've thought about easements like WRP, that they're narrowed down to just only for nature. They can be on working landscapes like forests, ag land protection, things like that. And they can be to federal agencies, so you can do that with a government if you'd like. They can also be the state, DNR, cultural affairs, counties, cities. And then at the bottom you'll see that's where NGOs or land trusts come in. So you can kind of pick who you want to work with. You can donate an easement to your soil water conservation district if you'd like. You can also do that with a land trust. I'm going to give you kind of the land trust perspective, but just kind of in the back of your mind know that it can be whoever you want to work with. So these are our projects that we've done in the little green dots. I apologize if you're red-green colorblind. It's just going to look like a lot of dots. But the red are our conservation easements. So we're really trending up on easements. We're seeing about 17 to 20 conservation easements per year now, where we used to see 2 or 3. So we're really seeing that as a popular tool. We've done over 20,000 acres of conservation easements total, over 150 statewide, and we're helping our partners do them as well. The key though is to know that you have your conservation goals, and that's important, but there's also tax benefits to this. I'm going to kind of dive into this. One of them is deductions and credits. It also helps you in your succession planning, reducing value for inheritance in your estate. So if you have land and it's worth a lot of money, let's say development value, and you don't want to have to pass on that burden of that development value, you want to keep it at ag value, and easement's a great tool for that. So as an example of an easement, I'll kind of dive into this. Think about if you have an adjusted gross income of $50,000 a year, and you donate a conservation easement that appraises at $800,000, which is actually pretty common when you're dealing with development value. You can deduct $25,000 per year, so that's half of that $50,000, and you get to do that for 15 years. So you would deduct $400,000 based on that $800,000 contribution. Now this is on a website, so don't feel like you have to dive into it, but there's also an Iowa income tax credit that's afforded as well. Now if you're a qualifying farmer or rancher, this is even the better part of an easement, you can now deduct 100% of your adjusted gross income. So there's a provision in the federal deductibility that allows farmers and ranchers to take 100% of that value per year. And the reason why I did this is because you can kind of think about the analogy of being kind of land rich, cash poor, using that deduction. So this would be like if you had high development land, you wanted to take it to pure agriculture, you would be able to use these things. So this is just a down and dirty example of how that might play out. So I'm going to give you some real life examples of easements we've done in the last couple of years. If you look down here in the Fair Acre Farms down by Knoxville, you can kind of see Des Moines. Up here, short little drive down to this land. There's a closer look at it. So it's kind of your typical farmland. Now this scenario, they wanted to sell this land, but they wanted to sell it in the family. But they were kind of struggling with, well, how do we make sure that it's permanently protected? It's been in our family. Our sisters have kind of stewarded this. We've made sure things are done organically. We've made sure that things are maintained. So we want to kind of remove some of the negatives. So you can see they had some pasture, some corn. They didn't want some of this pasture plowed up. Nice little farmstead, kind of mixed agriculture with grazing, so forth. They were able to sign this conservation easement, then find funding for their nephew, which was really cool. So they had the high level protection, sold it to their nephew, which, and I'll get into the details, and of course then had a practical farmers buy a field day and all those things. The easement doesn't preclude any of that. So what they were able to do is donate the easement, take some deduction and credits. The reduced value because of that easement allowed them to sell at a lower price. So there wasn't a gift tax trigger or anything like that. They reduced some of their capital gains issues. The new owner's bound to this easement, and the new owner, the buyer, was integral in kind of crafting the easement. So they actually had a say in what that language looked like, and there was a lot of flexibility. So in this scenario, they wanted to sell it, they wanted to maintain those conservation values on their land. Because what if the nephew sells it, right? What if 10 years from now something happens and they sell it, and then it goes to maybe someone who's not going to treat it the way they want it? This easement's in place and it would transfer sales. Another example, I'm going to dive right into this, is ALE, Agricultural Land Easement. You've probably heard a little bit about this in the Farm Bill, but this is a program that actually purchases the development rights to keep things in agriculture and make it available for agriculture. It doesn't require agriculture, so there's kind of the nuance, but it's going to always be available for ag. And so it's a statewide competitive grant. This is where a land trust can really help you. So we had, the Nature Conservancy and INHF are the only two land trusts that have used this program in Iowa that I know of. But it's a purchase CE, 50% comes from USDA, 25% hard match, this is cash, it can't be in kind, has to come from another entity. So the land trust, or it can come from the state, has to fund that. So essentially it's a 75% purchase, and then there's that 25% that can come from the landowner. It's based on fair market value. I'm going to go through a real example. Here's one on the Upper Iowa River. So we work a lot on the Upper Iowa River, high conservation value, but we're also very interested in the agricultural practices because of the development. So this land right here is where we work. Kind of see there. The closer view, obviously mixed ag, so it has row crop, it has forested land. Very neat. We're able to kind of restrict, okay, this is the area for row crop, this is the area for grazing, there's some limitations on the woodlands. This is all worked with the landowner, but it kind of narrows us down to a point where now we feel like we're getting kind of the good conservation that we want. The landowner's like, well, this is what I was going to do anyway. They get a cash payment. It's a really cool deal. So this is the Jewell family, who is now in their 5th generation, running this place, right? It's just outside of Decorah, a really cool opportunity. But it can never be mined. Think of some of the frac sanding that's going on. Nobody wants that in this area of Decorah, but it's now permanently removed. So you can kind of see the mixed corn. This is actually organic corn, although that's not required. This is what the family wants, and there's the Upper River in the back. They have organic turkey, so that's obviously allowed under the easement. Beautiful, beautiful area. So a lot of it stays in grass. We've heard a lot about keeping things in grassland and how important that is. So this can't be broken for row crops under the easement. Again, very consistent with what the landowner does. The day before and the day after this easement look identical. So this is very consistent with what the family's been wanting to do for years. This kind of solidified it. Plus it helps them now because they've taken some of that value that was being kind of held in as development. I mean, this is prime development on the Upper River. So they were able to capture some of those dollars, reinvest it in their property. So that's pretty cool. And then this is kind of what we get as kind of thinking big about conservation. This is over 2 miles of the Upper River. So if you were to float through this river, it's agricultural land, it's beautiful. You might say, well, this will be developed someday. No, it won't. Karst features, always a real impressive part. Of course, trillium, things like that. We allowed for some flexibility. Here's a little cabin they wanted to be able to rent out as kind of value added for their land. So there's a ton of flexibility that can happen. And we've done the same thing in the Luss Hills. And so this can be applied anywhere. There's not a lot of money in the FRPP or the ALE program, but we're able to bring that to Iowa through land trusts. And this is how that kind of worked out. So it was a bargain sale, per se, of that program. So here's another example of working with the land trust. This is kind of shifting gears. This is a land that was bequeathed to INHF. So someone had left it to INHF in their will. She had no heirs. She wanted INHF to own it. But this was a really unique situation where she was in Omaha, right? And then she had a tenant. And so there was a real disconnect between what she wanted for the land and the tenant. Because she was in a care facility, this money needed to feed them. We kind of hear that story a lot, don't we? Where the landowner needs the cash rent. There was an intermediary, a farm manager, that really wasn't succincting what the landowner and the tenant both wanted. So when we got this property, literally, we met with the NRCS. They said, this is probably the worst farm we've seen in Jasper County. This is supposed to be a grass water breaker. That's pretty rough. The terraces had blown out. And talking to the tenants, like, I'm sorry, I just couldn't, afford to fix all these terraces. I didn't know if I was going to rent it next year. I didn't know what was going to happen. And that's a very real world scenario, right? And so what I mentioned to this 27-year-old tenant, who when I asked her, are you a beginning farmer? He said, no, I'm an old fart like the rest of them. Because I used up my beginning farmer status at 27 years old. And so I want you to farm like it's yours. He said, well, if I owned this, first thing I would farm these slopes, I'd fix the waterways, I'd fix the terraces, and all that. So well, let's get that done. And so we're able to do that. So this was before. Afterwards now, he's got some really good corn ground on the top. We've enrolled in some CRP, which he gets the CRP payment. So we've got 42 acres of prairie on this 200 acres now. He said, I would pay you more if I didn't have to farm those steep slopes. I don't want to farm that CD, et cetera, slope, but I'll pay more for the big ground. So we worked out a really cool deal as a land trust, owning that land and kind of partnering with him and giving him a long-term lease. So it worked out very well. This is not meant to be an insult to the landowner or the tenant. It was kind of a scenario where there was a disconnect. So we're able to kind of bridge that. On the DeCook Ranch, let's fly through this. This is just a flat-out donated easement where they retained ownership. What was interesting, they had these remnant prairies that they were grazing and bison grazing. And so we were able to bring our land stewardship interns in there. We wanted to see the prairies restored. He wanted to kind of see see them restored too. And we kind of worked out a grazing plan. So we had our young interns coming out there removing the brush in these virgin prairies. He was grazing over 1,000 acres so the bison would move in and kind of move out because they're a really cool deal. So we're able to kind of find what we were hoping to see happen through that easement. But now our investment in time is protected because we have that conservation easement. They were able to take the deductions, and then of course that makes us line. So it kind of gives you kind of a window in maybe some of the things that are available. Of course, we do prescribed fire, so we're able to work with them on prescribed fire in their pasture, so he's grazing. He's also, a lot of his land was tillable. We wanted to keep it in grass. So the opportunity for us to see over 2,000 acres of grass on permanently preserved on property. And then we started integrating in fire stewardship. And now when he passes that on to his children, have to be boys, but it could be women, of course. So when he passes it on to his son, the easements will be on that as well. This is how that easement donation worked. They were able, again, to take the deductions and the credits, reinvest in the land, remove the development line, things like that. And you can also do this if you just have something that's just perfect. It doesn't have to be a working farm, but you may want to do something. We saw this earlier with Neil. Of course, there's a lot of opportunity for recognition. People don't do it for this, but we really see the value. So the Gift to Iowa Day is recognizing private landowners who've done conservation. So I'll kind of move through this. So consider land protection. If you know people that own land, start talking about it. You go to a restaurant, right? You want to see the whole menu. So this is the other part of that menu for land ownership is can you permanently protect the land and meet your goals? So there's an IowaLandownersOptions.org. This is a new website. It's all about kind of walking you through your ability to kind of explore some of the options for protection, and highly encourage you to have that conversation. We're not trying to push this. We're trying to make sure that if this is something you want to do, we'll help get you to the organization you want to work with. If it's not us, that's no problem. We just want to see more and more protection on the landscape. There's also the Land Trust Alliance website. That's a great resource and it helps you think about at a federal level. And I take any questions you have now. I don't know where we're at in time, so yeah, if you don't have questions, you get a quicker break. So, any questions, Allison? Back up a slide. That's a tough one. This one? Okay, I'll leave that. That's it?
We're doing quite well.
Okay.
So you're more than welcome to stay here. The exhibitors out there would probably love to talk to you, but we will be having lunch at 11:45.
Okay.
So 15 minutes.
I'll also kind of acknowledge we have Sustainable Iowa Land Trust here, and then Jen is with American Farmland Trust, although they don't have a direct presence in Iowa, they have a very strong national presence. So, is there any other land trusts? Think about the Nature Conservancy or from the White Rock Conservancy, that's a land trust, for Oak Land Trust. So, I highly encourage you to look at that. Hopefully, if you have any questions, I'll be here. But